Hi, everybody. So thanks again for coming. I just want to double check, make sure everybody can hear me all right. If you can, let us know down in the comments in the chat section. If you look below the video player here on the page, you should see a chat section where the fabulous Mr. Chris Reed is on there and doing his best to answer any questions that come up along the way during the webinar. So hopefully everything's working good for you guys. If it is, I'm going to go ahead and get started pretty soon here. And before we do, I'm going to pray so we start things off the right way. Father God, I thank you so much for the time that we get to have today, that we get to look forward to this coming year. We see all that you've done in this year prior, Lord, and what you're doing within our ministries. Lord, I ask that at this time you would just help us to do our best to be mindful of how we should utilize the resources that you give us that are at our disposal, Lord, that we can reach more and spread the word of your gospel further, Lord. And I ask that you would just give each and every person who's viewing this today the insight that they need to be able to move forward and do that much better in the coming year. I ask that you would just be with each of us today, that all would go smoothly with today's webinar, that the information would be a fruitful time for everybody here. And we thank you and we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So once again, thank you guys so much for coming along. If you guys have not been to a Sharefaith Academy webinar before, my name is Zach, and with me I have Mr. Chris Reed, who is on, as I said, on hand to answer any of your guys' chat questions. So if you guys have any questions, comments, feedback, anything like that at all during the webinar, don't hesitate to let us know. You can enter the chat just by putting in your name, or if you want to, you're welcome to connect to your Twitter as well, whatever is the most comfortable for you. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll switch you guys over so you can see my screen, and we'll get started with this webinar. All right, so today, first off, I'll just introduce Sharefaith. So if anybody here is a newcomer, does not know about Sharefaith, what we do, I just let you guys know what we're here for and why we want to share this information with you guys. And then we're going to jump right into the discussion with our media strategy. The first thing that we're going to dive into is formats. And we'll discuss some of the popular formats in the church right now, what churches are utilizing, and where they fit in terms of communication. After that, we're going to discuss purpose. So we'll move on from formats and discuss the purpose, the goal, the idea behind media, why we're utilizing what we're utilizing, and how it impacts our church, and how we track the success of that. From there, we'll move on and we'll discuss uniformity. So we'll talk about how the bigger picture looks in terms of our media strategy and bringing it all together in one overall narrative. And then after that, we're going to move on to discussing accessibility and how the function of media is so that it's available to where anybody can be able to interpret it. And then we'll discuss delivery. So once we get discussing about media, we'll talk about how we deliver it, how we present it to the masses and make it available to those that we want to be able to consume the media. And finally, we'll have some next steps, just talking about a recap of the webinar and some ideas on what you can do to make your media better for the coming year. And at the very end, once it's all said and done, we will have a live Q&A. So any questions you guys come up with along the way, any discussion, feedback, stuff like that, if you guys have questions for us pertaining to this webinar topic, then by all means, throughout the time, go ahead and pop it in there, and Chris is going to do his best to monitor all of that. He'll do his best to answer those for you on there, but if there's any that we would like to answer live, or if there's something that he wants to throw my way to answer at the end of it, then we'll do that as well. All right, guys, so a little bit about Sharefaith. About Sharefaith. Yeah, Sharefaith. All right. So Sharefaith, if you guys are not familiar with us, is one of the most trusted resource providers for churches in the world today. And we have had the privilege of coming alongside and serving thousands of churches worldwide. Our mission as a company is to partner with churches globally in expanding their outreach and proclaiming the gospel. So first and foremost, what we do, we recognize it as a branch of ministry to be able to train and equip churches and ministers like yourselves to be able to go out and spread the gospel throughout the world. And that is the driving motivation behind what we do. As I said, we have had the privilege to serve thousands of churches. In fact, over 120,000 churches in over 160 different countries around the world in the past 14 years that we've been around. So we've had some pretty amazing times with just being able to reach out, and now things are just continuing to grow and expand, and we love the opportunity we have to come along and help churches out who are doing different things with the services that we provide. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, though. I want to get you guys familiar with what we're talking about. So we're going to start off with media formats, and particularly we want to go through, and this is going to be a great webinar for discussion, for reflection. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions that are really aimed at you personally in terms of what your ministry is doing right now. So I want you to reflect on those kinds of things. And if at any point you would like to include something or add some more suggestions, I'm just going to provide just a variety of formats here, some stuff that we see very commonly used in churches today, or maybe starting to become more popular within churches today. And I'm not going to suggest that when I bring these up that this is everything that you should have, but these are just examples of things that you can utilize. So what we're looking at is essentially communication from your church to your audience, and that's one of the primary uses of media within the church. You're talking to your congregation, to those that you're trying to reach out to, and so we have various formats available to us to do this. So you can see a list of, I've just got some 9 examples here that you can look at. I've kind of grouped them into similar categories. So the first one that we are seeing churches use more and more of is media through the web. This could be through their website. This could be through their social media channels. This could be on their church mobile app if they have one of those. So you're starting to use more media, as websites are continuing to get more, I should say, more intricate, but yet keeping it to a good design. Used to be, you just put a page on there and it was good, but nowadays you want to be able to catch someone's eye, and you want to be able to be clear in your message when somebody utilizes any of your online platforms. So web media is a big thing. Continuing on from that, email is also a major thing that we actually just had a webinar last month about church email newsletters. That is available on our Sharefaith Academy channel on YouTube. But we have email as a major thing that is now instrumental in how we communicate and reach out to people on a mass level. And then projection media is a big one for inside the church. So when people come to the church service, information, graphics, designs, videos, anything like that you're using within your church service to help illustrate your sermon, to help promote announcements and things like that. And so then, aside from these digital resources, we also have our print resources we use inside, like bulletins, which are, of course, a staple within churches. When somebody comes and getting a bulletin that has some information, it's a tangible thing that they can hold in their hand. Newsletters are a great way to kind of have something local to be able to keep people within the church knowing what's going on, usually, is what that's more utilized for. Merch is something that I added to this list because I just ran across some great articles on utilizing merchandise in your church and the purpose of merchandise. So I don't say that in terms of like trying to sell t-shirts to raise money per se, but merch could be anything. It could be a youth camp shirt. It could be a coffee mug with your church logo on it, a bumper sticker. There's different things like that are really made with the purpose in mind of communicating as well. Just in a different format. And then lastly, I have down here some more kind of external print and physical items like flyers, posting those around. Banners or signs are something that you're putting maybe out in a more public area or out in front of the church or something that kind of says something about the church or tells them about an upcoming event. And then postcards is something that maybe not a lot of churches are using these days, but just because each demographic is different, each area is different, things like mailers and postcards are still used to some extent. So these are just examples of different ways that, different formats that churches are still using today. And if you guys have other suggestions, by all means, feel free to chime in. Now, here's the question I have for you down at the bottom of the slide. You'll see it says, what do you believe to be the most effective format in your church currently and why? I want you to reflect on that. I want you to think back to what you feel that your church is currently employing as far as a media format and how that is helping your church. And so keep that in mind, and we're going to move on here to the purpose of your communication. So understanding the purpose behind the media that you're using and thinking of ways that you can better make use of it. So I have two kind of major categories of purpose with media and your communication. You have an internal set of communication and you have external communication. So let's dive into these a little bit deeper. So the first part of internal communication starts at the head level with leadership, staff, volunteers, people who are the backbone of your church, who are working to make sure that your organization, your ministry, your church, whatever that you're a part of, is working together, that it's a well-oiled machine. So communication is vital in this sense to make sure that, of course, everyone knows what's going on, keeping people on the same page. Media is instrumental in this as well. Now, internal communication, a lot of times you're using basic email servers, maybe a group email server, something like that, or you're just sending out letters to people's boxes or something like that. But it doesn't have to be pretty per se a lot of times because like, hey, this is just coming from the pastor, this is just coming from the secretary, two people on staff. Sometimes though, there's uses for media within that where you're sending out thank you cards to volunteers, appreciation letters, doing something special for an event. So there's ways that media can still be employed in that area. From that point, the announcements. So announcements within your church is a big thing. So this is relating to announcements that your church sees, your congregation. So media is a huge part of this. There's a lot of ways that media comes into play that can help make or break your church announcements. So this is a huge thing with engagement. It catches their eye to have designs that are appropriate and well done for this, and it reinforces the topic of your content, helping to increase retention, which just means that you have a better chance when you utilize media with your announcements that folks will remember those announcements, and there will be something that clicks with them on a visual level, or verbally as well as they hear about it, whatever senses that you engage with that. And then finally, for internal communication, discipleship materials. So discipleship materials are something that obviously a lot of churches, if they haven't already started kind of producing their own for this, or if they are even looking at using a third-party one, maybe with a trusted curriculum provider or something like that, you'll notice media is a big part of these things. Having imagery, having designs that work together with it. Again, this kind of comes back to the retention aspect, because as you introduce visuals into it, just like in school and everything, you're going to increase retention and it's going to increase the effectiveness of your discipleship materials. All right, so now let's talk about the external communication. How are we doing? Okay, Chris? Okay, cool. He's got a big old smile for me. Yes, he's just excited about this. So, awareness. So, first thing, of course, with external communication, in terms of what your church and ministry is doing, you want people to be aware of your church and ministry. You want people to know about it. You want to get the word out there about what you guys are doing and who you are. So gaining awareness in your community is a huge thing. Having media that backs that up, utilizing things within that helps promote your church brand, if you want to call it that, basically the overall image and message of your church. So having things with your church logo on it, obviously, is a big way to help, and then having that continue on. We'll talk a bit more about that. So gaining awareness in your community, promoting your events and outreach through various mediums. Secondly, talking about connection. So apart from awareness, also, the idea is you don't want people just to see it and go like, oh, that's cool, and then walk away, but you actually want to make a connection with them. You want to have something that actually engages with them. So having media that is meant with a purpose of connection, and this could be something like if you have, say, a promotion for an event, including something with that promotion that provides a a means to act upon. For example, like if you go to a public location that has, say, a billboard that has flyers on it or whatever the case may be, seeing tabs on the flyers that people can take off that has more detailed information they can take with them is an example of this. Having some way that they connect, and it gives them an opportunity to engage further. And then, of course, and this is the main mission as to why we're here, why we're doing this, why we're doing what we're doing, and this is something that media cannot be forgotten about when you're doing it, is evangelism. So apart from just trying to promote your church or spread awareness for that, spreading awareness for the gospel, sharing Christ with others. So using things like tracts, helping people to equip your congregation to be able to share and invite others and be able to spread the message of Jesus Christ is obviously a huge plus. It's something that you want to help everybody within your church walls to be able to do better. And there are ways to do that with media where you can provide them with means that even if they maybe aren't the most outgoing people who just want to go up and hug someone and tell them about Jesus, obviously you have different personalities within the church body, yet we're all still called to the Great Commission. So having a means that people can still exercise their faith and still be able to go out and reach others is a huge plus as well. All right, so the purpose is great, but then we have to look at certain goals and the reasons why we want to have that media be successful and tracking that success. So, see my cool little dart with my target here. So we want to talk about what goals we set for each type of media we use and how we track that. So the first thing is whenever you implement any type of change within your media, you want to have a way that you can measure the success of that. So some examples might be if you are implementing a new page on your website, using services like Google Analytics or other tracking software out there to be able to monitor the traffic that comes through there and following that traffic to make sure, like if that page has a specific purpose or call to action on it, that they're going through the process you want them to. So if you create a page to promote an event, to promote your church, then obviously you want them to be able to get to that page effectively, and you want to make sure the traffic is coming through there. And then also seeing that people are, say, registering for the event, or committing to something with it, or doing something to show some level of interaction and engagement that helps you understand that page is in fact driving people to the event. So having different ways to track the success on that things. Now that can be a little bit trickier with print materials. Print is definitely one of those areas where a lot of information gets lost. You don't know the full story on that, but there are ways, as I mentioned, for example, with the flyer idea, where if somebody is taking a tab, you can mention on there, like, bring this tag to be able to gain entrance to the event, or bring this to, and we'll give you something special when you get here. You can kind of think of whatever's appropriate for what you're doing, but it's just a great way to kind of measure the success of that is have them follow through on an action that you give them to help let you know that that was instrumental in bringing more people. As I said here, providing calls to action. So that's a major way that you help to track success of this. If you just promote awareness of an event, but you don't actually provide any means to follow up on it, or it doesn't have to be an event either. It could be something as simple as like, hey, come visit us for service, or hey, we're having a special fundraiser going on right now, or we're doing a special outreach where we'll be, ministering to the community. Things where anything like that is happening is fantastic, and it's great to let people know about it, but the only way that you're going to know if that actually helped at all is by giving a specific call to action through there. So as I said, you could set something up like an event registration form on your website, and that's a clear way to see what's happening through there and tracking that. Also using services like Google Analytics to monitor your traffic. If you're looking for people to download sermons off your website, tracking that information. So anything you can do to help monitor activity on that stuff is going to help you understand what is being successful as you're going through your goals and what's not. And so anything you can do to help promote that. Another thing, and this is something that I understand, some churches might be a bit more hesitant about, but it's surveying your church to find out more about their thoughts on the media in their church. Are they taking notice of media that you're utilizing so you can understand that it's being presented in areas where people are seeing it? Are they feeling that they understand clearly what's being communicated to them through it? Maybe you can ask them how they originally found out about the church and what methods worked for them. And so you can go through and see, obviously what helps your congregation to be able to stay in touch and understand what's happening, as well as maybe find areas to improve if you're finding spots where things are dropping off at. So.
Do they like worship leaders' hair?
Chris is like, do they like the worship leader's hair? Is that V-neck too deep? Does he need to back up on that? Sorry. Yeah. So different ways that you can survey and kind of understand and make sure that you are communicating what you want to communicate. Now moving on, and I know if I'm going a little quick here, I just want to make sure there's enough time at the end so we can talk more. And again, I definitely encourage you guys. It's a great discussion webinar. So I love to hear from other people what they're doing and some things that have helped them through this process. This is a great part of the community of Sharefaith Academy and giving people the option to speak together too. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kinds of questions and stuff you guys have going on. So going ahead, jumping right into uniformity intermedia. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Uniformity, as I mentioned, is kind of the overall narrative. It's essentially maintaining different aspects throughout your media, and this is a part of design, this is a part of communication as well, to where these things are all in sync with each other. So first of all, I mentioned the idea of building a brand. And it's a weird thing to talk about in ministry, I know, because when we think of brand, we think of companies, we think of marketing and stuff. To some degree, there's many things that we can take from this, though, and still incorporate that same overall concept into how we want to communicate and build relationships with others. The great thing about building a brand is it develops different aspects of your relationship with people, both inside and outside of the church. And so connecting your media with your church by using your church logo. So a church logo is obviously an example of branding where you have an identity, an image that represents the identity of the church, includes the name of the church typically. And so having something like that, and then other signifying elements as well that work together. So maybe the colors that you typically incorporate in different things that match your logo. So there's different parts where you can connect all of that together, so as people see it, it always identifies your church with it. Apart from that, maintaining your design across platforms. So as you kind of have this identity of design, if you will, keeping that same overall feel doesn't mean that you can't try different things here and there, of course. You definitely don't want it to look the same every time, but there should be some consistency in the way that you use graphics and imagery, your fonts, your colors, layout of different items, perhaps, and doesn't mean that those can't change over time or you can experiment with those by all means, but having a level of consistency where it's something where people who continually see that media, take part in it, that they, again, still recognize it with your church. Maintaining your distinct voice across your designs. Now, what I mean by this, when I say a voice, I'm talking about the wording, the delivery used in your content, whether that's written, whether that's spoken. So if you have, for example, your senior pastor, say maybe make some videos for like a welcome message out there, or like to promote awareness about things, or maybe you have a senior pastor who just does his teachings, maybe says some welcomes and things like that for your church, but you have an executive pastor or a youth pastor or someone else on staff, or even a group of volunteers who work together and promote other areas of the church or inform others about it. Whatever that looks like for you and your body, having that consistency so you have those people assigned to that task. And that's a great way to make sure this stays the same, because if you have one person who's in charge of your emails, you want to make sure that that person continues the language that they're using across each of those emails that they send out. Likewise through the newsletter, through any bulletins. So there's lots of areas where you don't want it to have kind of sound off the wall, or, you want to be aware that like when somebody is putting something through, it might be good to kind of just do some quick moderation of it. So there's different areas where this all comes into play. And the idea is, again, it just increases that identity that people associate with your church, and they can recognize that voice when they see that and know, there's a personality there behind it. And then ultimately, familiarity with your message. Staying consistent is the reason that this is brought up is because, again, it just helps to reinforce your message, and it makes it easier for people to retain and identify. So again, constantly seeing the imagery of your logo, maybe against a specific background of your choice, or perhaps imagery of staff members, layouts that you utilize and stuff. It just helps them to kind of understand and familiarize themselves with the flow of things. And depending on the generation too, there's different things that we're about to get into a little bit, but there's different ways that different people place that in priority on communication and having that consistency versus that content. So now that's where I'm going to lead into this, speaking to your church demographic. And this is a major question that I think a lot of times we don't ask ourselves enough. Sometimes we just jump into it and say, okay, I need to write a newsletter, so here's what's going on. And we might not be thinking about some of the other things we've looked at. Is this a consistent voice? Is this a uniform design? Are these formats the type of formats that the people who I'm trying to speak to will readily read? Will they look at? So there are different things that help us to define a demographic and ways that we can separate things. First of all, and I hope nobody is taking offense to any of these things, by the way, in terms of like how we look at different demographics, but they're really things that you should be thinking about as you are communicating to the people you want to communicate. Age is a big thing because, especially in the world of design, there's just different ways that we might design something for, as my pastor likes to call them, the more experienced Christians, versus the younger generation. So if you are trying to communicate something to a youth group, example, you'd say you're promoting a youth night or an event or activity for the youth, then obviously there are things you want to take into consideration with that. You want to keep in mind what your design looks like. Is it something that is eye-catching for them? Does it appear in a way that is easy for them to understand what is being communicated to them? Is this media being presented in a format and in locations where you will attract the demographic that you're looking to attract? So are you posting this kind of stuff up, say, on a school billboard or a college billboard? I can tell you, as digital as I am and try to make use of digital stuff all the time, I, back in college, would still go through and read stuff that was going on in the billboards, because that seemed like one of the best places to find out what was going on for people in my age group or stuff that was going on around campus. So that's a great place to go attract that demographic if that's who you're after, college-age students. I would not post a flyer about that stuff in a retirement center. So you have to think, where is this going? And you also have to think, like, are you actually in an area where you're reaching those people? Like, if you have a youth group at your church, or say you're trying to build a youth group at your church, and you are only promoting that in your church building, say in the entryway or something like that, or on the announcement slides, you may not be really generating the traffic that you're trying to reach. So different things like that come into play. Apart from age, also gender. Obviously, the church is an area where we do a lot of things together, and we have a lot of men's retreats, we have women's retreats, we have things that pertain to couples and singles. I mean, we have so much emphasis in each side, and so things like when you are promoting, say, women's events, utilizing fonts, color choices, designs, that, are things that, help build that image, and they understand right away, okay, this is something for the women of the church, and vice versa for men as well. You might see something where it uses more floral design or perhaps more colors that are pleasing to the eye, or something like that. And then for guys, we're pretty easy, I think. You might see something that's a bit more straightforward or simple, or even have some cool designs of like a wood grain background or something. There's different things that you'll notice as they're pertaining to certain things. So gender is a demographic too that matters when you are trying to reach people that you're trying to reach for specific events. And cultural background is a major thing. So this perhaps I would say speaks more to missionaries and church planners who are joining us, because but it does have some voice to existing churches as well. Your cultural background is important. Wherever your church is at, your media needs to represent and speak to the culture of your church and community. You see a lot of times where people try to force this image of what their church is like. Oftentimes you might go into a place and maybe they're using, a lot of churches, we try to reach as many people as we can, right? And so we just try to show people of all age groups, all ethnic backgrounds and everything in our church and this diversity that's there, but maybe we don't actually have that. So when somebody comes, that can be misleading, and some people actually really take offense to that kind of stuff. It's a major thing for some people. Likewise, with your media, with the events that you're doing, you have to be aware of if you're in a new area, if something like that, where it takes place in terms of people's values, in terms of priorities. I can tell you, even we're here in Oregon, in the good old US of A. I've been to the East Coast on several occasions, and for all you East Coasters, man, you guys are in a different country. As far as it's just so different. It's just a very different culture. There's a lot more history there. There's a lot more diversity in that area from where I'm at. So there's just a lot of different things that are happening there that you wouldn't find on the West Coast. So I've actually seen, we have a lot of people who come from the East, from the Midwest, and plant churches in our region, because for those of you who know, the Northwest is one of the most unchurched regions out there. And there's a culture shock. There's this new challenge that they face because church here is in many ways very different from church, say in Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee, New York even, and Michigan and different places. There's just a totally different dynamic and way that we go about things. So stuff like that all plays into how media and communication comes through as well. So all great things to consider when you're looking at your demographics, and especially when you're looking to have something that is specifically going to someone else. Now here's a good question too. Do you actually speak to your demographics, or do you just kind of do a one-size-fits-all approach? Maybe you have one piece of media that goes out that's for church-wide notice, and you're just letting everybody know about what's going on. Does that come in a format where it kind of meets the middle in terms of all these areas so that no matter what demographic someone fits in, they can clearly understand the message, it's well done in a design that fits whatever you're promoting, these kinds of things too. So that does not mean that a one-size-fits-all approach is necessarily incorrect, and that it shouldn't be used. But you have to think too of if you're trying to reach the youth specifically, if you're trying to reach older generations, younger families, whatever your aim is with that, making sure that your media really speaks to the people that you are trying to communicate with. And so that comes to the next point of accessibility. So having pretty designs doesn't make it a good design. As Steve Jobs once said, I've got a quote from him, design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. And so when we talk about design in media, making sure that that design is offered in a format that is very easy to consume. So I'm going to talk about all these 4 points and how they all work together. So as I mentioned before, I've talked a bit about the ideas of fonts, of colors, of imagery, of layout. So I've kind of touched on all these things already. But there's a lot of things where, regardless of nowadays, we see a lot of people who still are very new at this sometimes, or maybe are not as, I should say, versed when it comes to media and design, and so mistakes happen, and that's fine. We're human, and ultimately, those mistakes may not make a huge impact, but sometimes they can. Fonts are a big area where we can see some really well done media with the right font, and it can also totally cause a good media to go bad. So fonts are a special thing where, you've probably seen some examples, I don't know if you have or not, but sometimes communicating the same message with different fonts can have a huge impact. For example, you see a lot of times people will really dog on some fonts out there that get overused or maybe aren't as nice looking as some of the others, like Comic Sans is a big one that a lot of people constantly make fun of. And there's probably some Comic Sans lovers in the webinar today. I'm sorry. I wish I could say that you were in the majority, but I know a lot of folks out there who have a thing against Comic Sans. And Papyrus is another one that gets a lot of flack, and I think that's from just being used very heavily when sometimes it doesn't really look like it should be. So there's different ones like that are out there, and there's different examples of how we can use fonts. Like there are some more, there's two groups of fonts. There's serif and sans serif that get used a lot. You might see those terms when you're looking at fonts. And so serif fonts are ones that have, say, like a little corner or edge to them, like to kind of give it a more traditional look, like Times New Roman is an excellent example of a serif font, or perhaps a Trajan Pro, sometimes known as the movie poster font, because you see so many movie titles that utilize that font to give it an epic feel. And so there's some great examples of some good serif fonts, and those might be appropriate in some occasions. Like you'll see those used a lot for maybe more direct publications, or for like some stuff that's relating to the holidays. There's a lot of times those are popular. And serif fonts are more simple fonts like Arial, Cambria. There's a lot of great, Helvetica is a very popular serif font. So there's things like that. And then there's more elaborate fonts that you can get into. Script fonts are sometimes great for embellishing something or having a nice looking title, but they're usually not ideal to like type out paragraphs in. So again, things like that to consider as you're putting something together. You want to make sure that it's readable and that it fits well with the rest of your design scheme. Colors are a big one too. You see a lot of times where colors are perhaps not thought out so heavily before they're used, meaning that they can clash against each other. It can make it very difficult to read, strain your eyes. Finding complementary colors, if you have specific colors you use in your logo, maintaining that look and feel through other materials that you're talking about your church through. And feeling free to make different variations, perhaps a black and white version of your logo, or a grayscale version, or something with more neutral designs for certain purposes. But colors are very powerful because they increase the expression and they have a psychological interpretation. You've probably heard how like red is a power color. Blue sometimes can be as well, but it's a bit more peaceful and calming. So there's things like that people register in their mind when they see it, and your colors make an impact there. The imagery, of course, is a big thing, because if you're talking about, let's go back to the conversation, like say you're doing a youth night, you probably wouldn't put a picture of cats frolicking in a field. Wouldn't fit. Doesn't make sense unless you're talking about, the annual youth cat roundup or something like that. But just something where you want to make sure that whatever imagery you're using, at least if you can't find something that directly fits exactly what you're looking for, that it doesn't cause confusion when somebody looks at it. So it just needs to fit in a sense that it doesn't distract from the overall message of what you're talking about. And then the layout, of course, is also very important. How you put visuals together with your text, keeping in mind things like, do you have enough visuals, or is your content too text heavy, especially on web pages or in printed materials, where you have long things that maybe people are going to read? Are you breaking that up with different visuals? Are you utilizing different text formats to help that? Do you have images placed on the sides, above or below, centered? There's things like that that'll come into play, how you do that. And that's on a web page, that's on your PowerPoints, that's in your newsletter, that's in your flyers. Everything has a layout and a scheme to it. So making sure that it's done in a way that's clear, you can easily follow it, not putting important information too far apart from each other where they can't understand. Like if you're going to promote that you're having a discipleship class at this location at this time, you need to make sure that all of that comes together in succession. You don't have, here's the title of the class over here, just straightforward. Sideways over on the left, we've got the class name and time. You got to make sure that everything's together in a format that's easy to follow. You got to make sure too, English readers, we're left to right, up and down, pretty straightforward. Some cultures are different in that way, so you got to think of how they look at things. All right, so I spent a lot of time on that, but now we're going to go ahead and talk about delivery, and then we'll talk about the next steps. Whoops, I'm missing some dots here. Okay, well, first off, we're going to talk about a visitor's table. So when somebody comes to your church, and this, again, some of these are examples of ways that churches are doing things, but this is something I want you to reflect on and really think about how you're using this, or if you're using these types of method to get this media to your people. Visitors table. Obviously, this is a very common thing. My church has a visitors table. A lot of churches utilize something where there's essentially a central location that should be very easy to spot when somebody first comes in, and first-time visitors can learn more about your church. So there's materials there on hand that they can actually go to and be able to learn more what's going on. However, with that, you should always make sure, and this is my suggestion. I understand when people are short-staffed, but really, if you have a church, you should have someone available to be an in-person representative who can speak to someone. This could be a greeter at the door. This could be an usher. This could be a pastor if your church is set up to where a pastor is available for this, to be able to communicate to people and answer questions for them in person. I had a horror story that someone gave me not that long ago. I was asking about how they came across our church, and they had told us they had gone to another church prior, and they enjoyed the service. They loved everything about it. It was all good, but they went to go find out more about the church, what it took to be a member, and things like that. So they ran across a visitor's table, and there were some materials there, but they still had several questions, and they could not get anyone to be able to spend more than a second with them. They said they would find someone who was an usher, and they just kept pointing them back to the visitor's table, or kept saying like, well, it's in the bulletin, or you can reach out, or you can email somebody. Like, there was nobody on hand to really answer those questions for them. So it totally ruined their experience. So having somebody in real life who can communicate and provide a human feel to that interaction is so important, and shouldn't be left out when you're looking at your strategy for how you communicate to visitors at your church. Also, as far as an external perspective, word of mouth is still, one of the most, if not the most effective ways to be able to bring people to church. People need to be able to invite their neighbors, their friends, their family, people within their community. So this goes back to what we talked about before, equipping those people with means to do that. And then, of course, making sure that you are increasing a culture that wants to do that wants to invite people to their church, that wants to share the gospel, and giving them the confidence to do so. Apart from this, we've talked about web-based platforms. So when you deliver certain media, where some people deliver bulletins, they have blog posts, they promote announcements and events. This can be done through your website, through any of your social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything that your church is utilizing. Which, by the way, if you are using social media channels, just for reference, Facebook is definitely always your number one, and Twitter used to be the number two for a long time, but nowadays it's actually Instagram, which is as far as what is being the most heavily used. And some churches have even stepped into the world of Snapchat and stuff like that. This comes back to your demographics. You need to go where the people are, and you need to start off with one place. If this is something new or something you're just beginning, just start off with one place and stick with it. And Facebook, I think, is always the best recommendation for being able to do something like that. And then from there, moving on to other platforms if you feel like you have the ability to do so. So the nice thing about Instagram that I like is that it actually can cross-post to Twitter and Facebook, so sometimes it can make the job a little bit easier for you. So it just depends. Email is a big one. Email is the number one tool for communicating with people these days. It's something where we kind of maybe think maybe social media is taking over, or it's just not as effective as other, in-person means. Each scenario is different, but if you want to be able to reach people on a mass level, you want to be able to reach your church all at once, you want to be able to reach out to people and let people know what's happening all at once, having some type of an email newsletter or an email service that can communicate that is a huge tool to be able to have at your disposal. And again, if you guys we did have a webinar on that just about a month ago that you can go check out on our YouTube channel that talks more about that. But having a church email newsletter is a huge tool that helps to continually promote awareness of your church. People see your church show up in their inboxes, however often you're sending your newsletter out, and it's a way to keep you in their minds, but also keep people informed, because that's going to be one of the main reasons, main methods that people will learn about what's going on. There's my dot. Welcome packets. I love welcome packets. I think that welcome packets, I haven't seen them in all the churches I've been at, and again, each area is different, and hopefully you guys have something for like a type of welcome thing. A visitor's table is nice. It can have different things laid out that people can go pick and choose what they want. But if you're really wanting to reach the first-time visitors, having a means to provide something that has a wealth of information that pertains to what they would like to know. This can include all kinds of stuff. It could include, obviously, like a copy of the bulletin or a newsletter, a recent newsletter for the church, something that lets them know what's going on, something that clearly states the mission and vision of your church so they can understand you, maybe a references to the staff leaders so that way they can kind of know who's who with pictures so they can put faces to names and there's a personality and identity behind it. Something that I think a lot of churches, if your budget allows for it, using digital resources. So things like a CD or a DVD of sermon recordings is popular, although even that is becoming less used these days, and more people are in favor of like MP3s. So having something with like a flash drive in it that has different things, video recording, audio recording, maybe a welcome message on the video, like all of that stuff just makes a huge impact, and it looks so nice and professional, and it really doesn't take that much time to be able to put together. If you spend a couple weeks on getting something like that, so it's just totally laid out, and then you can just continually update it as you have new content made for people to be able to stay in tune with what's happening, then something like that can go a long way to making a great first impression for people. And then lastly, I just want to point this out as an option because it does matter for some people. Selfie pose. So it does matter for some people in terms of having, being able to mail things out. Mail is tricky. You don't really know for sure what the effectiveness of it is, again, unless they're bringing back, a postcard or whatever you was sent out to them, a flyer. But it is a way to continually, again, have a presence, like let people know you're there. Obviously when it comes to events like VBS are great opportunities to have flyers go out to your community to let them know. You could send out newsletters to members who are already in the church if you want to. I know some churches still have that in their congregations. It works with them so that they get good reach that way. Or even just something like having just a simple like a greeting or something saying like, hey, we miss you. So if you have someone's information from when they visited, but you've noticed that they haven't been to church in a while, sending something like that out. Or prayer requests. There's all kinds of things that you could put into even a physical mail format. And there's a nice thing about that it's tangible. It should have your logo on it. It should have something that where they can identify that with you. But the flip side is very expensive sometimes to do that. So you have to look at your budget. You have to look at your demographics and understand if that is a good way to go or if the email is a better approach. So you can kind of, again, these are things that you can try out, you can experiment with, and you can implement ways to track your success on different things. So, lastly, we're going to talk about the next steps. And so, so this is all great information. Hopefully you guys are seeing like, hey, you got some ideas that are going on now, but we want to talk about the next steps. What's the action that we're going to take from now to make 2017 a better year in terms of communicating and reaching people? So the first question you need to ask yourself is, what goals do you want to achieve? Well, what is currently not happening, perhaps, that you would like to see? Or maybe what's something that you're seeing a certain, like there's a change taking place and all of a sudden now maybe you're getting more interaction on your social media than you had before. Or maybe you want to see more of that. Maybe your website's not getting traffic. Maybe your bulletins are perhaps not displaying as effective information as they ought to. You can go through, like look at everything that you're doing currently, get together with your team if you have one, or if you're the person who's doing it all, take a step back and look at what's going on and see what do you want to achieve next year. Does this mean that you're going to have to increase your budget in some areas, so you have to talk to your pastoral team about that? Does this mean that you might have to bring on another volunteer or staff member to help you achieve that goal? These are all valid questions that you need to ask yourself before you step into 2017. What formats are you going to use? Maybe you guys have a print bulletin for a long time, but now it's time to take things to the digital age and bring it into a website format or an email newsletter or an email bulletin. Maybe you guys have been recording the audio of your sermons, but you're ready to step up and do some video recording. Maybe you want to spruce up your web page with some video, with some new layout going onto it. Looking at all the formats that you currently use, maybe you're ready to take the step of getting your own church mobile app because it'll help increase communication within your congregation. Whatever it could be, looking at what you have currently and seeing, is this what I'm going to work with in 2017? And my goal is going to be to maintain this and make it better. Are there some things that are just not proving to be cost effective or not really worth the time that you're investing into it, that you're ready to drop? Doing some experimentation, trying some new things, and then looking at what you can do to improve that. And I would evaluate this type of thing on a quarterly basis. So every few months, looking at any changes, looking at the goals and different tracking methods that you've used to see what's happening and making sure that you're on the right track. And if something's not working after you've given it a few months, then that's plenty of time to do an evaluation and say, okay, this isn't going to work for our needs, or this isn't the right step, so we're going to move somewhere else, or we're going to do something different, or we're going to just change the way that we present that. So there's different things with that. What delivery methods are we using? Again, this is kind of similar to what I talked about with the bulletins, like communicating it, just having it within a church, or like adding it into your church email newsletter or your website so it can be obtained digitally. Are you delivering things to the right demographic the way that they can recognize? Like, are you reaching out to the youth via social media? Because that's where you're going to find a lot of them. Are you even elderly people within our church are starting to use the internet more and more? So are you implementing resources that are for them through those measures? Because we're starting to see a continual rise in those folks starting to use the internet and social media as well. And lastly, how will we increase accessibility in our design is a big question you want to have, because again, you can have all these great ways of doing things, but if your design is not communicating as effectively as you need it to, then you need to look at that and understand what changes need to be made in terms of how you go about it, how you lay things out, what fonts you're using, all of that stuff we talked about, and where that's going to go from here. So all good questions to think about. Maybe you have some more too that you've been reflecting on as far as the coming year. At this time, we'll go ahead and switch it over to live Q&A, and we'll see what you guys have to say. All right, so Christopher, have there been, I've seen you type in here and there, any questions that folks have about what we've discussed so far? Okay.
Yeah, Patrick Robinson asked if we were going to add something like planning center.
Oh, so
Plans like that?
sure. So for those of you guys who are familiar with Sharefaith, I mentioned kind of a list of different things that we do with church media, with church websites. So we have a lot of services that churches use, especially as it pertains to these types of things. And so Patrick is asking about if we're going to have a service like Planning Center. I can tell you at this time, Planning Center is a great tool. We don't have anything that's in that realm. Really, we are a content-driven service, so we provide the content, the designs, and things like that you need to be able to get your message out there. Planning Center is just a whole other ball game and stuff. So, at this time, nothing like that I've heard of. But we always do our best to provide the best services to folks, and it's just a thing where we want to make sure that you guys are taken care of with whatever we provide. So, all right, any good suggestions or feedback that we're getting through the pipeline?
I don't have any.
No?
You did a really excellent job.
I did thank you, Chris. So I am glad you think so. So hopefully everybody else feels that way as well. Well, I'll give just another few seconds here just to make sure nobody has any questions about anything. While we're waiting, I just want to let you guys know too, a big heads up. If you guys have not already seen in our newsletter that went out today, we are having our special Christmas sale right now. So if you guys are not currently with Sharefaith or you're looking to renew or upgrade, we're doing 20% off of all of our yearly plans. So that you can look at different things. All of our plans include over 78,000 graphics, templates, and designs to work with, including Photoshop files, 4K files even for super high resolution screens and monitors. We've got the Sharefaith Kids curriculum that's available with our complete members. We have church websites, church mobile apps. So you guys can look at that. It's
Online giving?
online giving, worship presentation software, the whole kit and caboodle. So if you guys are looking to really, if you want to supercharge things right now and get a huge boost in terms of what you're capable of, check it out. It's, I mean, you know, you can't. I'll be honest, and I'm biased, I know, because I'm here at Sharefaith, but there's just nothing that compares as far as finding the cost effectiveness and the wealth and quality of the material. So, you know, again, I know you're probably going to be like, yeah, Zach, whatever. But go check it out, sharefaith.com. And like I said, we have that going on right now. And just in case anybody misses out on this, we're going to make sure I'll follow up with you guys. You'll receive an email from me sometime tomorrow that will include some more resources, some more helpful information. And I'll mention that too, so you guys have links to that sale so you can take advantage of that. But
Did you mention 20% off?
I said 20% off.
Okay,
20% off. That's like, yeah, it's significant. It's a major thing. Oh, looks like we got some questions.
Suggestions for working around Facebook's newish algorithm?
Facebook's newish algorithm.
Yeah,
So talking about promoting, yeah, well, that's been a continuous trend with Facebook. You can't just trust anymore that your likes are going to get you the traffic that you want. You know, Facebook is continuously moving. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in Facebook marketing, and I know that's a little bit different from the topic at hand, but I will say that there are lots of things you can do within Facebook now. I would say if you're really trying to promote an event and get the word out about something special happening at your church, if you guys are just like hammering out your Christmas services, you know, obviously as far as organic traffic, the best thing to do is to have your people help you. Talk to your congregation, encourage them to like and share your stuff to get it out there and make sure that other people are seeing it, their friends and family, as far as the free option goes. Other than that, look into Facebook ads. You can get a lot of traction with not much depending on your demographic that you're aiming for. And you can do different things to pinpoint. So if you're just looking for people in your community, or if you're looking to be more specific in terms of you know, where their backgrounds are at, or their, you know, whatever it could be. You can look at all that stuff within Facebook's promotion tools. So I'll just say, yeah, you definitely have to put a lot more behind it these days to be able to get it, but it does pay out if you do it right. So check that out if you go check that out. And as I said, for now though, definitely just encourage your people. Just tell them, hey guys, we want to help, you know, just make this Christmas service awesome. We want to be able to share the gospel right now, and a great way that we do that today is by getting the word out online. So equipping your people, that's going to be your best bet. Doing things like Evites, Facebook, giving people different things to be able to hand out to folks. It all comes together. Flyers, bulletins, things like that people can use to be able to hand stuff out and spread the word. Just, you know, use the best, make the best use of the resources you have.
Now, do you have any more app designs coming for the next year?
Any more app designs coming for the next year? I know we're continuously improving the features. We're definitely working now more with some different features with calendar, with live streaming and stuff that's coming down the pipeline.
Calendar right now.
Yeah, the calendar's out now, huh? Yeah, so we just released the calendar feature, so that's a great way to keep people informed. So if people have your app, anytime events are going on, you can submit it into the calendar, and then they get notified through their own, like my iPhone, it actually syncs up with my calendar on iPhone or Android or any of those. So it'll actually continually let me know what's going on so I don't forget. And then, like I said, live streaming is coming down the pipeline, and we're working with that, so there'll be some options there to be able to incorporate live streaming into your app, so that'll be a cool feature. And I know there's some other stuff they've got planned too. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's some really great things coming down. As far as designs go, I can't say there's so much customization already in the app that you can really do a lot to make it your own. Different layouts, you can upload your own graphics and things like that, so there's lots of cool stuff there, and we'll just see what, I know they're constantly at work though to make it better. I see Chris typing over there.
Somebody his daughter asked if Sharefaith was used for anything other than church uses. He was asking if a business can sign up for the service.
Okay, Jeff's daughter has a question about using Sharefaith for businesses. We're really catered towards Christian nonprofits and churches and ministries. That's really what we design for. I wouldn't say that we would say no, as long as it's nothing weird. I don't know. Like if you guys are using it for your business, we probably say though that I think overall we discourage that just be.
For business website.
We're not business website. I'm just trying to be honest and just sincere about it. There's going to be a lot of features there you probably wouldn't make use of as a business, and you might find that it's not built around your model of what you would want your website to do. So, I would say that really the model that we have is designed for churches and nonprofits and ministries and things like that. So, that would be the best way I could answer that question. So if you would like to talk more about us, though, kind of explain what you're looking for, maybe more about the nature of the business, though, by all means, reach out to one of our member coaches who will be able to look into that for you. Just go to support.sharefaith.com, and you can reach us by phone or create a ticket with us, and we'll be happy to talk with you more one-on-one about that, though, Jeff. So, cool. All right. Well, I think we answered everybody's questions. I hope that you guys have some good food for thought here. I think there's a lot of questions. A lot of questions I'm asking myself too in my church as we're getting ready to go into 2017, and this is a time now where it's just a great opportunity to make some changes and look ahead to the future. So, if anything else comes up, I don't know what time it is, but we'll stick around till noon. If it's not already that, I don't think it is. Then we'll stick around for a little bit just to make sure we answer any further questions you guys have on chat, and I'll go ahead and close us in prayer. So. Father God, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the opportunity we have to come together to discuss your business, Lord, and how we can reach others. And really, again, Lord, it all just comes down to, reaching the souls of the lost, Lord, being in the business of promoting your kingdom and making sure that people know about you, know how they can have that salvation and that peace and that rest, Lord, and what it means to be a follower of Christ. Lord, I pray that as we go on our way today, that the people who have come here to attend this webinar, that they leave refreshed, they leave inspired, that there are just ideas running through their head that they're jotting down, Lord, and taking note of and getting ready to plunge into. Father, I ask that you would just use us mightily for them. And Lord, we thank you. We love you as servants of your kingdom and as your children, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, thanks again so much, guys. Such a pleasure. I love talking about this stuff with you guys, and I do really do my best to make sure that it's giving you guys some good food for thought and some good feedback on what to do next. So if you guys have any comments or suggestions, questions for us, feel free to reach out to us. And until next time, love you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your year, great rest of 2016. And looking forward to seeing what 2017 brings. In Jesus' name, I pray you guys have a wonderful time. All right. Love you guys. God bless.